Hi everyone, welcome to this seminar where hope can be found, developing a hope complex. And we're going to look at right now mental health and how it affects people with autism. And Dr. Tony Atwood, the psychiatrist, said this: 80% of people with autism have issues with mental health and anxiety. It's much higher than the general population. We're going to look at the cause of a hopeless complex, purpose of a hope complex, strengths and limitations and how they can help us with our mental health issues, and confident empowerment. How can we be confident in the things we do that help us be successful? And how we can position ourselves to serve, which creates self-efficiency, which creates a strong, healthy mental health perspective of life. And one of my favorite proverbs was written over 3,000 years ago was Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes a heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And if we can have that tree of life and the longing fulfilled, then we can have strength. One of the things I ask a lot of people is name a nostalgia experience, a time in the past when they felt good, or an event that brings them happy memories. Maybe it's a childhood memory. And by asking this, it makes people realize that there was a time when they felt hope. And if in the past they felt hope, guess what? In the future, they can experience hope again. We're going to first look at the cause of hopeless complex. They discovered the hopeless complex at the University of Pennsylvania in 1967, Dr. Martin and his colleague, Dr. Mayer. And I never want either of these doctors within 600 feet of my dog, Rudy. He's a Jack Russell mixed with Pomeranian, and he's my best friend. The reason I wouldn't want him near him is they were using electrical experiments on dogs. They had group A, they give him a shock on the left side, they quickly move to the right side to avoid getting hit with electricity. Group B, you'd give him a shock on the right side, they quickly move to the left side. But group C, no matter how many times Dr. Martin hit him with electricity, they'd stay in one spot and do that sound. You see, group C, when he gave him a shock on the left side to move to the right side, the day before they got a shock on the right side to move to the left side. They learned hopelessness. And some people with autism, they learn hopelessness. Maybe they had experienced severe bullying. Maybe they had chronic underemployment in life or chronic relationship issues, and every relationship they had seems to crumble. And it could even be academics. They struggled in academics. Their sensory overload becomes so high in anxiety. And a hopeless complex caused us to quit trying. They did an experiment on rats, and they found that rats can also have a hopeless complex. You put a rat in water, can tread water for 24 hours. If you take that same rat, put them underwater for even 3 seconds, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, within less than a minute, the rat's going to drown. We don't drown by falling in water on the spectrum. We drown by staying in water. And a lot of times we stay in our hopeless complex, and then it causes us to give up trying. There's a saying, an object in motion stays in motion. And a person in motion, they stay in motion and motivated. So the hopeless complex can cause isolation and stop emotion and hinder us from transitioning adulthood, hinder us in relationships. So this is why this seminar is so important. And the cause of a hopeless complex, as I mentioned, can be many different things. Chronic illness, traumatic events, mental health issues, low self-esteem. So we're going to look at how this develops. The best description I've ever heard of the hopeless complex is an unfortunate seal named Sally the Seal. In 1989, Exxon Valdez hired a drunken sailor to sail 54 million gallons of crude oil across Prince William Sound. And the captain's name was Captain Joseph Hazelwood. As he's taking the oil across Prince William Sound, he wasn't sound mind, he had too much to drink, and he hits a reef. And within 24 hours, 11 million gallons of oil cover Prince William Sound in Alaska. Or the next 2 months, Exxon Valdez spends $2 billion cleaning up all the coastline. And they realize when they get done, they forgot one key ingredient, the wildlife that was victimized by it. They don't want to spend an extra $2 billion. They pick one lucky seal, they name her Sally the Seal, and they build her even a water slide and earn donations to get Sally the Seal and her friends cleaned up from oil. The big day comes, every camera's on Sally the Seal as she slips in the sea, and out of nowhere comes a killer whale, and Sally the Seal becomes Sally the Meal. And many of us on the autism spectrum, we feel like Sally the Meal. We've been torn up, ripped up, chewed up, and spit out. And that causes us to give up trying. And the hopeless complex usually develops over time. It's not usually just one event, or it could be, but usually multiple events, multiple times of feeling like a failure to a place where we give up trying. There's a man, he's good with working with his hands. We call him a handyman. He changes his oil, gets a little oil on his shirt, so he goes and puts it in the washer. 45 minutes later, puts it in the dryer. Now, what's the purpose of a dryer? I know what you're thinking. This is an easy question, to dry, and you got it right. And the purpose of a hope complex is to give us self-efficiency. That's a belief that we begin something, we're able to carry it on to completion. If there's a blockage, we can't accomplish goals. We can't accomplish things that most people take for granted. So the man puts the clothes in the dryer, he comes back 45 minutes later and it's dripping wet. So he knows the dryer is not accomplishing its purpose. Something's not right. Checks the wires, being a good handyman, they're fine. Puts his hand in the air duct, no hot air is coming out. So he knows there's something blocking the dryer from accomplishing the purpose of drying the clothes. So he puts his hand up there, pulls it out. It's a robin's nest. Now that robin's nest didn't appear out of nowhere. It was one branch at a time, some gum wrappers at a time, maybe some leaves and mud. The same way the hopeless complex, maybe it was broken relationship branches. Maybe it was mud of a bad self-image created by a family member or friend or someone who said you're never going to accomplish anything in life. Maybe it was some gum wrappers of chronic underemployment or unemployment. And now it's blocking you from accomplishing your goal of accomplishing the things you want to do in life. And it stops you from being in motion. When you're not in motion, depression comes, isolation comes, and many other things come that you don't want related to mental health issues. In Flagstaff, Maine, in 1948, they had this large lake called Flagstaff Lake. And it was only a few people lived there, about 20 lumberjacks. And most of the cities that had lumber had a river. So you cut down the lumber or cut down the trees, throw them in the river, and they'd get to the lumber mill and be processed quickly. But the Flagstaff, Maine area didn't. So they decided to flood the lake and make it into a river to make it much more efficient, the lumber in that area. And they interviewed a guy who sold his house for the project, who lived off the lake, and said, what's it like to live in a ghost town that's going to be underwater? He said this: when a window breaks, why would I repair it? When the grass grows, why would I cut it when it's going to be seaweed? Where there's no hope for the future, there's no power in the present. And that's how a lot of people with the hopeless complex feel. They feel like, what's the use in trying? Everything I've done in the past hasn't come out the way I want, so in the future it won't. And where we don't have hope in the present, we don't have power and self-efficiency to carry on the things we need to get done. And here's how we overcome it. We take our strengths, we use them to accommodate and overcome our limitation. And I'm good at communicating. I make 40% of my living writing books and speaking at large conferences as keynote speakers or mega churches. But what I'm horrible at is I'm not a good handyman. When my wife had my daughter, Michaela, we had a baby shower. And she got something called a crib. I couldn't put it together. My wife put it together. So I accommodated for my limitation by having my wife put it together. If I would have put it together, I would have heard this knock on the door, be Child Protective Services. They'd say, why are you making a prop for the next Saw movie? A few years later, I got my wife an electrical fireplace for Christmas. Guess who put it together? My wife. I didn't want to be on 7 o'clock news. Apartment catches on fire due to an electrical wire shortage from an electrical fireplace. So I had my wife put it together. This past Christmas, my daughter, who's now 8, was only 7. She got the Scooby-Doo haunted house. Who do you think put it together? My daughter did, because I tried. I couldn't get the trap doors in the right place. Now, I don't cry and say I never can change my oil, so I might as well let my car die after 3,000 miles. No, what I do is this. I use my strength, the money I make working at the hospital, speaking at 70 events a year. I adapt and accommodate for my limitation of being a handyman, and I go to Pennzoil and I get my oil changed. There's a guy. He's great at music. He's going to Oral Roberts University. So you know what his strength is? Music. You know what his limitation is? Doesn't have great equipment. He doesn't have a big audience following. So what he does is this, is he looks at where his connections are. People with autism usually don't have great connections. We're like Velcro shoes that are 30 years old. We don't connect well with people. He looks at his connections and realizes that in Tulsa, where Oral Roberts University is, there's a church on every corner. He goes to his mega church, said, I'll do a free concert. Only thing I ask is I get to use your equipment. I get to promote it through your church. And he starts doing these. He makes DVDs. He graduates with a marketing degree. He moves out to Tennessee. There's a battle of the bands for MTV. He turns in his DVD that he made with all the wonderful equipment, with a large audience. He wins battle for the band. That man's name's Ryan Tatter. He's One Republic. He's now worth over $150 million because of his music. His one song alone, Halo, that he wrote for Fiancé, has made him $4.5 million. But people with autism, a lot of times, their limitation becomes bigger than their strength. And they don't know how to adapt and accommodate and build connections. As I said, we're bad at connecting. There's another band. They're driving their gig. They go to the bar. There's almost no one in the parking lot when they perform at the bar. They go a mile up the road. They see another bar. The parking lot's filled. And there's a flashing light that says, Naked Ladies. What do? They change their title of their band to Bare Naked Ladies. And now all is history. We've all heard of their songs. So the way we success in overcoming that hopeless complex is we learn what our strengths are, we adapt and accommodate for our limitation, we build connection. And to do this, we need a few things. We need mentors and a support team, people who believe in us, people who see our vision and see our gifts and refine them. We need marketing ability, being able to know what our strengths are and how we can use them to transform the world. And then we need the ability to delight. A lot of times people with autism like me, we're like Trump on Twitter. Whatever comes in our mind, we spit it out. We're not great at delighting. And that comes by mentors who have great people skills. Then we need confident empowerment. Confident empowerment means we know our strengths, we have self-efficiency, the ability when we begin something, we can carry on to completion, and we're bold as a lion with our gifts. There's a shepherd in Kenya. He's a good shepherd, takes care of his sheep, takes them out one day to the pasture and he hears a sound. Meow, meow, meow. So he goes and investigates. When he investigates, he sees this little lion cub whose mom was killed by poachers. He knows if I do not help this lion cub, he'll die. So he raises him with the sheep. The lion cub begins to think he is a sheep. He eats grass like a sheep. He skitters like a sheep. 3 years go by, and guess what? That lion cub, he's no longer a cub. He's a full-grown lion, but he thinks he's a sheep. Shepherd's taking a nap, hears a scuffle sign, wakes up, and he sees a lion coming upon his sheep and the lion who thinks he's a sheep. Bats it over the head. Later that day, he takes the sheep and the lion who thinks he's a sheep to the pond or lake to get water. As a lion who thinks he's a sheep is getting his drink, he sees his true identity, his reflection, and he realizes he's king of the jungle, and it was pretty bad for those sheep after that. And when we learn our gifts, we're able to use them to overcome the challenges. In fact, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the lowest level is food and shelter. The highest is self-actualization. Self-actualization, we could word as a hope complex. When we realize who we are, our gifts, and how we can use them to transform society, transform the world, we can be as bold as lions. And that's the good news today. And then, finally, we need to position ourselves to serve. As we position ourselves to serve, we're an object in motion, stays in motion, a person in motion, stays in motion. We're able to use our gifts to serve those around us. And the moon doesn't give light on its own. It's positioned right as a satellite with the sun. So like the sun, we use our gifts to serve others, the moon, and then we're able to illuminate or bring light in our dark areas. And position to serve means that we know where our gifts are, we know where our talents are, we know where the people who need those gifts and talents are located, and reaching them with our gifts. There's a young boy. He's 10 years old. Parents take him to Orlando. He's excited. He gets to see Disney World, Universal Studios. And the day before he's to go see the ocean for the first time, there's a horrible tropical storm. A couple days later, parents take him to the ocean, and he sees an unusual sight. There's starfish as far as the eye can see. And the starfish are on the beach because the storm brought them up. The boy picks up one starfish, throws him in the ocean to save his life. He picks up two more, throws them in. He keeps picking them up. Then there's an old man, jaded by the sun. In fact, he looks like a walrus. He's been out in the sun so much. He said, "What difference are you making, young boy? There's thousands of starfish." Boy picks up one, looks at it, says, "I'm making a difference for this one starfish." And he throws it in the ocean. The old man picks up a couple of starfish, starts throwing them in the ocean. Next thing you know, everyone on the beach is picking up those starfish and saving them. We can cause emotion. We can cause an amazing movement when we use our gifts and talents and we're positioned to serve. And when we only take in, we feel death in life. There's two main big bodies of water in Israel. One's the Dead Sea. It's way below, thousands of feet below sea level, so only takes in. And all you have in the Dead Sea is minerals and salt. Nothing can live there because it's not giving out. It's only taking in. And when we only take in on the spectrum, we experience anxiety, we experience severe depression, darkness. But then there's another big body of water, the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee gives out to the Jordan River. It receives water from the mountains, and it also has many rivers that give into it and out of it. And by giving and also taking in time, it flourishes with water and life in that water. And when you get done with the tour of the Sea of Galilee, you get a fish meal, and that's one of the things I like best. And also there was a guy named Jesus who walked on that water. So it's a pretty amazing place. You want to check it out. I'm going to end on this. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hope was complex, takes away our motivation in life, makes us want to give up. But a longing fulfilled, that's a tree of life. And as we learn about our gifts, our strengths, we use a adapt and accommodate to our limitation. We build connections. And much of life is based on connections. Where can hope be found? It's found right in us as we use our gifts and develop a hope complex. And then I want to encourage you real quick to check out my books. Views from the Spectrum, A Window in Life, Faith for Your Neurodivergent Child was one of the top selling autism books. And it was an ND's final out of 5,000 books on parenting relationships. It finished number 4. And A Parent's Guide to Autism, Practical Advice, Biblical Wisdom, which was a top-selling Christian book all time. You can get these on Amazon. You can order them from Barnes & Noble, so check them out. And finally, check out my Honey Badger verse of the day. Every day on YouTube, I share an amazing scripture verse, and the honey badger's there, and I give commentary on them and how we can apply them to our lives. They're less than 2 minutes, and time you can have your coffee, you can enjoy the Word of God and have a hope complex from God giving you hope in His Word. Thanks so much, and subscribe to me on YouTube if you like this video. Ron Sandison.